So, Mr. Dunn, thank you very much for agreeing to meet with me to discuss your experiences of Cobham over the years. Perhaps you could just start by introducing how long you've lived in Cobham for and your role here.
I've lived in Cobham for about 12 years, but I've known Cobham and obviously been at school in Cobham back in the 70s was when I first, and I have a lot of friends who live around Cobham as well, so a long time really.
A long time. So that's interesting. When you first moved back here, thinking to when you moved to the school 12 years ago, did anything strike you as different then from the Cobham you knew as a schoolboy?
Yes, I think the wealth was far more evident in terms of people's possessions and belongings in the houses, the way the houses have changed. A huge difference there, and physically things have changed quite dramatically as well.
And then in the subsequent 12 years, has that change continued, or have other things become apparent?
I think it's just been ongoing. The accruing of property and the rebuilding of property, those sorts of things, has continued at a pace.
So when you say the rebuilding of property, it's clear, driving around here that there's lots of new houses, but are some of those new houses on the sites where old houses were?
Yeah, the whole area was known as a stockbroker belt, even back in the 70s and early 80s, and obviously had houses built on them there, but the houses had bigger gardens, and now what they do is they buy a house, they knock it down, and they may build 2 or 3 houses on site, which are bigger than the original house, but obviously with smaller gardens and the like.
Yeah, okay. And obviously you've been here for a long time, so almost by definition it must be quite a nice environment in which to live. What are the positives of living around Cobham?
It's a very safe environment. It's a very nice environment in terms of socially and the facilities that you have. And Cobham is a nice village. Really, it's a village, not more than a town.
Yeah. How do you? What still gives it that feel, that quintessential village feel?
Quite small and compact, and it has the sort of the village facilities. Yes, it has a supermarket and a big supermarket, a little bit on its outskirts, but it still has that feel of not being. The high street doesn't expand. It sort of has remained the same. Yes, the shops have changed, but it is still as big as it was.
Still fundamentally one high street.
Yes.
Okay, great. And is there anything then that you found frustrating or difficult, I suppose, about living in this sort of an area where such kind of wealth and development?
There certainly seems to be a Cobham price, rather than, which is very different to the national price. And friends who live around here, if they're trying to get something done in their house or garden or whatever, then they will say, they've regularly said to me, well, you have a Cobham price, and then if you go 10 miles out and you ask someone to quote for the same thing, it's a lot less, or more competitive, shall we say.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be enough to. That's a price, I suppose, you're willing to pay.
Yeah.
For it. You said you have friends around here, and you mentioned their thought on the Cobham price. Do you know? I guess it's the sort of thing you must talk about. Is there anything else that comes up frequently as a source of frustration or controversy?
Lack of in education, in fact, lack of school spaces. It's highly competitive in this area, highly densely populated, and we've often talked about the fact that it's most probably a senior school down for boys in terms of places available.
Yeah.
So that is frustrating. Whilst it's a lovely place to live, lots of people want their children to go to the local schools, and the schools are very good in the area, but it's definitely at the prep school level, and then also at public school level it is down in terms of number of places available.
So that feels, I suppose, in terms that's a sort of a sense of pressure all the time for you, and possibly even for your boys. Would they have a sense of sort of pressure of needing to compete to be the best sort of thing? If
Yes, it is very competitive, very competitive. Now that's in some ways it's a good thing, but another way that you have to manage that pressure, which can be quite difficult, especially for a young boy or a young girl to deal with that, knowing they have to compete to be able to go to somewhere where they want to go to.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Thinking back to your time here, can you think of any local issues or changes, proposals, anything that ever stirred up some real controversy? Any project or anything?
Two main ones I would say, and it was road building, the one, obviously building the A3, the part of the A3 that bypassed Esher and then joined on to where the M25 is now.
Yes. When was that?
That was back in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
So I remember the time when there wasn't an A3. the old A3, which is called the Old Portsmouth Road,
Yes.
which runs through sort of the west of Cobham. That was the main arterial road down to Portsmouth.
Yeah.
So there were arguments there, as always, about road building. It's a very emotive subject, but eventually they saw the benefits of it, and it was built. And then also building the last bit of the M25, which was between Wisley and Reigate, and that was argued over for many years. And now it's embraced by all the people who argued about it.
Yeah.
Argued against it. It's embraced wholeheartedly.
Yeah, yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it? 'Cause the similar argument is coming up again now. Looking that area is so busy, they're looking to expand that interchange and try to reduce the congestion on that part of it. I guess I wonder what that tells us about the reasons why people initially oppose something, only then later to embrace it. I don't know.
Well, I think they're scared. I think of the impact it would have, and the worry. Back in the day when it was 1985, I think, when it was completed, there was still a lot of unknowns about car travel and all the rest of it. There are far fewer cars on the road,
Yeah.
and people saying, why do you need it, and why do we need to build this huge monstrosity? One thing they did do, which they sort of backtracked on, they built it out of concrete, and then they realised the noise was so great that they ended up tarmacking it to reduce the noise.
Interesting.
And a similar thing, I suppose, very recently was the Cobham services. They
Yes.
argued about that down at Downside, which is just outside Cobham. They argued about that, saying they would cause higher crime rates, all those sorts of things. And I think it's proving not to be the case.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was obviously taking greenbelt land as well, another very emotive subject.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting one. I'd forgotten how recently those were opened. And just moving on to that idea of greenbelt land, which I guess, as you say, the emotive subject. House prices must sometimes be something that gets discussed in the Cobham circles, whether for good or evil. And clearly, they're higher than the average sort of that whole Cobham price thing you mentioned. And one answer to trying to reduce house prices is to build more of them, and there are continuous proposals to build more, and the latest of which is in that sort of strip of land between here at Reeds and Cobham, around Knoll Hill Park, possibly up to about 2,000 houses in the area. What would be your sort of initial reaction to those proposals?
I would be concerned. I did read a bit about it. I'd be concerned in terms of how those houses are going to be serviced in terms of the needs. Not so much the infrastructure of the shopping and those sorts of things. It would go back to the healthcare, education, those sorts of things, those services. As I said earlier, we're already short in the education area, and to then, without building something else that will then fulfil that need, just building houses is a problem.
So just houses alone would be a disaster. It would need to be a whole sort of integrated thing. Okay, fantastic. When you see people from outside of Cobham, when you go and meet friends from elsewhere in the country, do you ever get a sense that they have a stereotype or a view of what Cobham is like?
Yes, it's often referred to as the Cobham bubble.
Yeah.
So it's something that, whatever happens in the rest of the country, it doesn't seem to affect Cobham in terms of house prices and those sorts of things, jobs and everything. it seems to just have its own economy, as it were, and it seems to go on its own merry way. You could, at any one time, you could search up on property websites, and you could most probably see. I remember a friend of mine did it, and there were 60 to 70 houses over £1.5 million for sale.
Crikey. Yeah. Okay.
At one time. So it is. It seems to just carry on, and I think it's sort of self-fulfilling. It just snowballs.
Yeah. Do you see any risks to its future? Could you imagine that snowball ever melting?
Well, it could do with Brexit.
Yeah.
Depending on, because the majority of people will be earning their living maybe in the city or on the back of what happens in the city, and you could see that Brexit, if it's not handled correctly, could end up causing us a big problem in this area.
Yeah.
Just the same as it would in maybe parts of North London where there's similar situations.
Yeah, so that could be sort of external factor, external shock that could alter the place. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been great to hear from you, and we've learnt a lot from it. Thank you.
Pleasure.